Welcome to the Alien Agenda with Gene P. Abel podcast, your ticket to the fascinating world of UFOs and aliens. Join Colonel Gene as we explore strange stories, debunk lies, and dive into the unknown. From weird encounters to hidden truths, we search for answers. So get ready for an exciting ride that will make you wonder about life beyond Earth. Join us as we uncover the mysteries of the universe and learn about alien sightings. And here's Colonel Gene.
Hi, folks. This is Colonel Gene in another episode of our podcast, Alien Agenda with Gene P. Abel. Today, I want to talk to you about a couple of different reportings that make up the mountain of information that has been accumulated on UFOs, extraterrestrials, and whether or not we are in fact being visited by intelligent life in the cosmos. The first episode that I want to talk today about is one that is clearly a fake. It is important that we understand that many of the things we read, many of the things we see on television are simply not correct. People do this for many reasons, publicity, money, whatever. But when we look at the evidence, we have to be really careful that we don't jump to conclusions. The first episode that I want to talk to you about this morning is a discovery in Spain where while a Spanish cathedral was being worked on in a place called Salamanca, they discovered what looked like a 21st century astronaut on the entrance to the building. This, like a lot of other earlier evidence, like the crystal skulls that was discovered in Brazil in the 1920s and the 3,600-year-old Mayan artifacts that were actually carved in the 1840s, show that there is sometimes out there evidence that isn't evidence at all. In this particular case, the cathedral that we're talking about was built between 1513 and 1733, and it underwent a restoration in 1992. One of the workers that was cleaning the building, Mr. Geronimo Garcia, was given the okay to affix a carving to the doorway of this cathedral. And there was a lot of buzz about this. People saying, the people who built this cathedral in the 15th and 1600s obviously must have seen astronauts. In reality, the truth was soon discovered, but quite frankly, the damage had already been done because in some people's eyes, they thought this was proof that our forebears were visited by astronauts, extraterrestrials, if you will, and believed what was obviously a bogus plant. Now I'd like to turn to another incident, which is in the gray area. A gentleman by the name of Gary McKinnon, a Scotsman, hacked into the United States government and NASA computers in the early 2000s, about 2002. This was one of the largest hacks and breaches of American government data that we've had. This became a very serious incident between the United States and Great Britain. We have an extradition treaty with Great Britain. However, when the United States investigated Mr. McKinnon's attack or look into our files, which included the NASA files, they found that they got opposition from extraditing him to this country for trial. What did Gary McKinnon claim to have seen? Well, he claims that he had hacked into the NASA computers and he found that since 1980, the United States, in conjunction with other countries like Great Britain, Italy, and Austria, and even Russia, had a space force that was termed Solar Warden. McKinnon claimed that this space force consisted of about 8 huge aircraft carrier-size ships and about 43 other support ships. He also uncovered what he claimed were a list of non-terrestrial officers that were stationed in this protective set of spaceships called Solar Warden. There is no question that this man broke into the computers at NASA and Department of Defense, but there is a real question of whether he saw something that actually existed or whether he saw something that may have been on the drawing boards as planned. Even some of the sketches that he claims to have seen may just have been that. It is difficult to believe that with the International Space Station, with all the satellites and all the astronauts, both from our country and others, that have been out in space, that no one would have seen or reported a space armada, as Gary McKinnon describes. So here is a report that I believe is in the gray area. Some of it could be true. He could have hacked into plans, ideas, conceptual drawings, but there is absolutely no corroboration from all of the space ventures that we've had, including the International Space Station, that there is anything like a space force existing around Earth and being populated by military staff and astronauts from around the world. The final incident that I want to discuss today is very different from these first two. For this one, we got to go back all the way to June the 15th and 16th of 1968 on a river in a place near Cua, Vietnam. Two U.S. Navy pilots or boats piloted by a Lieutenant Davis and a Lieutenant Snyder saw what looked like two saucers hovering above the river as their boats made their way into the interior of Vietnam. One of the ships was attacked and exploded, and the second ship, piloted by Lieutenant Snyder, continued up the river. He then engaged these UFOs as they reappeared and found that most of the shots that were being fired at the UFOs seemed to have been returned and were being directed toward his ship. The lieutenant turned around and headed for the open water where a Australian ship called the Hobart was docked or was stationed. On his trip, he contacted the Air Force for help, and two F-4s were sent from Da Nang. They too saw these two aircraft and fired some Sparrow air-to-air missiles at the two craft. Immediately, both the missiles and the two spacecraft disappeared. There was no explosion, there was no contact, and they, for all intents and purposes, sped away at speeds that are unbelievable. If the story had ended here, it would be strange enough, but it continues. The next day, early in the morning, a missile came out of nowhere and struck the Hobart. The two saucer vehicles appeared in the air, and the crew of the Hobart saw them, and two more missiles were fired at the Hobart, and it was seriously injured, although it did not sink. Soon after that, the two aircraft disappeared, and the U.S. Navy came to the aid of the Hobart that was damaged, as I said, but did not sink. As they went through the debris on the Hobart, they discovered that there were parts from the missiles that had hit the ship, and one of those parts contained a serial number. Well, it turned out that the serial number that they found on that part belonged to one of the Sparrow missiles fired the preceding day by one of the F-4s at the two craft. This report, of course, was sent to the Pentagon, and there was an extensive review about the incidents that took place on June the 15th and June the 16th of 1968. As a result of that review, the Department of Defense issued a directive to the Air Force and Navy pilots: do not engage any UFOs in the future. So here we have an incident where we have eyewitnesses, both on the 15th and the 16th, that saw the aircraft. We have an apparent return of fire from the Navy patrol boat on the 15th. And then on the 16th, missiles that were fired at these aircraft and disappeared on the 15th reemerge on the 16th and are fired at the Hobart. And we then have actual physical evidence of parts with serial numbers similar to those fired at the aircraft the preceding day. I think this is one of the more difficult incidents to deny. As we go through our journey, I am going to be looking in depth at a lot of things, some of which, again, may not be as clear-cut as the incident in Vietnam, but things that nevertheless shed light on the question that we are looking at in this podcast. That is, we may not be alone. I hope you're enjoying what we're doing so far. I am trying to bring to you information so that you can think about this issue, research it on your own. I would ask that you would notify your friends and let them know about our journey. And if any of you would like to be interviewed by me on the air,
please contact Deborah Wallace at deborah@pcm.agency.
We would love to talk with you and dialogue about your experience with extraterrestrials or UFOs or UFO sightings. As I said, this subject, other than the end of the days as outlined in Revelations, is one of the most fantastic stories that could exist. Can you imagine watching the news and seeing a spaceship on of the White House and a couple of extraterrestrials leaving the ship and walking towards the door of the White House? Again, this is Colonel Gene. I hope that you enjoyed our episode today and look forward to the next episode where we're looking at another important piece of the puzzle to determine if we are alone and are they out there. Thank you and have a great day.